All right, so I wanted to show you a couple of things. Some of my students have missed, some needed a little bit of extra help. So I wanted to go ahead and make a couple of videos just to go through the information that we have written. The keys to all of these pages will be on Canvas, but I wanted to just kind of talk through them for those that maybe didn't have this, or maybe you were out one day. This page is extremely important because a lot of questions are going to come from the information on this page and a couple of the others that I'm going to show you. So I wanted to start with the foundations of representative government, and it's going to be, okay, so in your packet you have all of the must-know sheets, and then you have the STAAR dates, and then you have the land acquisition map, and then finally you get to this page, okay? All right, so when we're talking about the foundations of representative government, we're actually talking about the documents and people that we took ideas from when we start writing our own constitutions, okay? So we're gonna go all the way back to the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta, that was literally in 1215. And it was the first time in recorded history where the king's powers were limited. So it limited the power of the king, and it guaranteed trial by jury that had never been given before. It was always, if you are accused of a crime, you go before a judge or a magistrate, and they make that decision. This changed that. In the 1760s, I think it was like 69, the English Bill of Rights was passed in England. And it guaranteed things like frequent elections, the right to bear arms, no cruel and unusual punishment, restated trial by jury. Remember that document 300 years ago that said that we have this right? Yep, we still have it. We still are required to get it. Okay, so remember that when we're talking about the colonies, we are Englishmen when we come over here. So just because we're not living on the island across the sea doesn't mean that we are not any less Englishmen, okay? So the Magna Carta, the English Bill of Rights, is going to apply to all of our English colonies. All right, so when the colonists get here, specifically the Pilgrims, okay? So let's remember there are two groups that are coming from England that are the two religious groups. The first are the Pilgrims. When they get here, they are going to land in Plymouth, and they are going to sign the Mayflower Compact. And this was just a document that everybody had to sign before they got off of the Mayflower. That was the ship that was carrying the Pilgrims over. And they have to promise to follow rule of law. That means that the colony is going to make all of its own rules. Everybody has to follow those rules. Okay, so it's the first form of self-government in the colonies. That's the Mayflower Compact. Okay, 1619, we're going to have something just for Virginia. Okay, so Jamestown is going to have its first assembly, representative assembly. So the Virginia House of Burgesses, okay, so a Burgess is a representative. So the Virginia House of Burgesses was the Virginia House of Representatives. This was the first representative government in the colonies. And on the STAAR test, it's been said that it's the first representative assembly in the colonies. In other years, they've said it's actually the first representative government. So just know that there is a difference there. Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, this was also just for Connecticut. It was not for any other locations in the colonies, okay? This was the first written constitution, I don't want to say worldwide, but pretty close to it. It wasn't a country for the entire colonies or anything like that. It was just for Connecticut. These two individuals, John Locke is the guy that Jefferson borrowed the phrase life, liberty, and John Locke felt that property, every single person is born with the right to own property. Jefferson disagreed with that. So he changed it in the Declaration to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the main idea came from John Locke. And then the last person here is Baron de Montesquieu, or sometimes you'll see him as Charles de Montesquieu. His idea was separation of powers, having 3 branches and all of them be separate in their beliefs and all that kind of stuff. All right, founding documents. Declaration of Independence, that's the document where we are breaking away from Britain. Okay, this is the one that starts when in the course of human events it becomes necessary. Okay, so this is not we the people, that's the Constitution. So 1776, Thomas Jefferson is going to write the Declaration of Independence. It's going to be signed. In it, you don't need to know the 3 parts, but in it you need to know that there are unalienable rights. Okay, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So you can remember that Thomas Jefferson, 1776, Declaration of Independence. Okay, during the American Revolution, we have now realized that, hey, we need to be able to govern ourselves. So our Second Continental Congress during the American Revolution, they are going to write the Articles of Confederation. Okay, this was America's first constitution. States had the most power, and there was no national court system, there was no president, any of that. We were shell-shocked. We were so afraid of a government that is too powerful that we literally gave our federal government no power. In all, the Articles of Confederation kind of functioned like the European Union does today, where they're all independent countries, but they're kind of governed through economy and trade and that kind of thing. That's essentially what the United States created under the Articles, okay? But through Shays' Rebellion and a couple of other things, we realized that the federal government is not strong enough, that if states have too much power, there's nobody to kind of rein it in, and it created problems. So we are then going to have the Philadelphia Convention to write the Constitution. So let's look at the Constitution. This is the one, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, assure domestic tranquility, all of those things. So it is going to set up 3 branches of government, just like Montesquieu wanted, okay? So to get this Constitution, we're going to have 2 different compromises. The first compromise is called the Great Compromise, and that compromise settled representation in Congress. They're saying, hey, look, we want to be able to have 3 branches, but remember, there was a Virginia plan and a New Jersey plan. Okay, they had those 2 plans. Virginia plan was the big state plan. New Jersey plan was the small state plan. One of them wanted equal representation. That's the New Jersey one. Why? Because otherwise they're never going to have any votes. And then the Virginians wanted the big state plan. Okay, so they're the ones that they're like, oh, dude, we should have it based on population. Then we can have all the votes. In the end, they are going to compromise, and they're going to have in our branches of government in Congress, they're going to have a bicameral legislature with 2 houses. One house is going to have equal representation. That's the Senate. The other house is going to be based on population. That's the House of Representatives. And we'll look at that in just a little bit. All right. Once we know that this is representation in Congress, that we then have to look at the fact that who would be counted. Okay, so in the end, because the South wanted to count all their slaves, and the North is like, well, that's not going to happen because you don't even treat them as human beings. Why would you get to count them? In the end, they compromised, and they said 3 out of 5 slaves count for representation and taxation. Okay, so they're going to say 3 out of the 5 slaves. All right, now we have a constitution. Let's look at our principles of the Constitution. Individual rights, super easy to recognize. Limited government, it's just the Bill of Rights. Limited government, no one is above the law. Again, it's usually pretty easy to recognize. If it's on the STAAR test, it's usually not. Separation of powers, okay? This created 3 branches of government: the legislative, executive, and judicial. To me, the best way to remember or figure out if something is separation of powers or checks and balances, this one, separation of powers, is just a job description, okay? It's so-and-so does this. This group does this. This person does this. That's all it is, all right? So if it's only one branch listed, it is separation of powers. Checks and balances is different. Each branch has some control over the others. So they can change other branch decisions. So like if it says the president has the power to make treaties by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. There's 2 branches in that statement, okay? So the president can do something, but he has to have permission of the Senate, okay? And there's a lot of instances like that in the Constitution. So, but they can change the decision of another branch. All right, we get to our next 3. Federalism is sharing of power between the state and federal government. There are 2 levels, okay? The state level, the federal level. You will also see this as the 10th Amendment and states' rights. It's the same thing. 10th Amendment, states' rights. It's some things the federal government can do, some things the state government can do, okay? The next 2 deal with people voting here in the United States. Popular sovereignty is ruled by the people, but it's where people vote on issues or rules, okay? Like with popular sovereignty in Kansas and Nebraska, the people got to vote on whether they wanted to have slavery or not. That is our issue or rule. Republicanism is when we elect our representatives, okay? So we, the people, we are going to vote to elect other people, okay? All right, Bill of Rights. And I was supposed to do the first one in this order, and I didn't because I've taught it the same way for 15 years and I forget new things. So, First Amendment, freedom of speech, press, religion, petition, and assembly. So assembly is obviously gathering together. That's why at school we have a public assembly. Okay, well that's when everybody comes together for some reason. Petition, that is if the current legislature is doing something and they're about to vote on something, I can petition. I can request things and tell my representatives, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. You see a lot of petitions going around getting signatures. That's that. Religion, obviously press. Press is writing things, and then speech. Now, remember, the Bill of Rights protects you from being arrested. It doesn't protect you from other consequences. I just wanted to point that out. Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. Third Amendment, this is from the causes of the American Revolution where we had to quarter soldiers, so this says we don't have to. Fourth Amendment, no unreasonable search and seizure, and I'm adding in privacy because the STAAR test has started to add in about questions about privacy, so that goes with the Fourth Amendment search and seizure. Fifth Amendment, there are so many things in this amendment, but for the most part, we're talking about self-incrimination and rights of the accused. I would actually say rights of the accused more than self-incrimination, but I wrote in pen and we're going to move on. Sixth and seventh, people get mixed up. The Sixth Amendment is a criminal trial. So for Sixth Amendment, you have a right to a speedy and public trial by jury if you are criminally accused. Seventh, it's like, this is in civil cases. So like if you owe someone money and they want to take you to Judge Judy, you can say, no, I don't want to go before Judge Judy. I want a jury trial. You have the right to do it. Eighth Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishment. Okay, punishment has to fit the crime. Ninth Amendment, rights of the people. And then 10th Amendment is federalism and states' rights. Okay, so typically if it's asking questions about the fall, it'll say federalism or the 10th Amendment. Once we get to the spring and we get to like the nullification crisis, instead of federalism, it will actually say states' rights. Okay, so it's kind of a thing on there. The Civil Rights Amendments, sometimes the test will say Civil Rights Amendment, sometimes it will say Reconstruction Amendments. We never know until it's a big happy surprise what that's going to look like. 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. 13th, slaves are free, no slavery. 14th, if you were born in this country, you are a citizen, so citizenship at birth. And then 15th Amendment is the American, African-American men have the right to vote. So 13th, 14th, 15th, you can just remember it as like free citizens vote, okay? 12th Amendment is the only other amendment out of the 27 that you need to know. And that is when we changed our presidential election process. If you remember in the first president, we elected whoever was running and got the most votes became president. Whoever got the second highest votes became vice president. The 12th Amendment changed that, okay, to where a president and vice presidential candidate are running together, okay? All right, the dates we already went over. You can pause it if you want to write these down. All right, the court cases. Some of you are still really having issues keeping the court cases straight. So let me go through these one more time. John Marshall is the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice for over 30 years. Okay, so during that time, his goal is to make the court grow in strength. He wants to make the court more powerful. All right, so let's look at his court cases. Marbury versus Madison is judicial review. That was in 1803. That's really the only one that I have a date anywhere on it. So Marbury versus Madison, 1803. McCulloch versus Maryland, this is the Banks case. Okay, so McCulloch versus Maryland is about the banks. And it was about, can the state of Maryland actually tax a federal bank? So it's a federalism case about banks. Gibbons versus Ogden, he was a riverboat captain. He was a riverboat captain. One of them, the state said, you can control this area of the river. One of them said that the federal government said you can control this area of the river. So basically, it's a federalism case of who can say he has the contract. So Gibbons versus Ogden is the riverboats case. So Marbury versus Madison, judicial review. McCulloch versus Maryland, banks. Gibbons versus Ogden, riverboats, or interstate commerce. Worcester versus Georgia was the natives case, or you could even say the Cherokees case. Can a state force decisions on Indian nations? So again, federalism. Answer is no, but this is also the one that Jackson said, Marshall has made his decision, now see him enforce it if he can. Thanks, Jackson. Dred Scott versus Sanford was the slavery case. So Scott is not a citizen, cannot sue in a court of law. Didn't stop there, though. He also said that Congress cannot ban slavery in any state because of Fifth Amendment property rights. So this Dred Scott decision, it nullified the Missouri Compromise is what it did. Okay? All right, so those are the Supreme Court cases. Let's look over to the presidents. You don't need to know every president, but you need to know the order of some of them. You need to know Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, John Quincy Adams, Jackson. You need to know that Polk was during Manifest Destiny. Okay, there. I don't know if Miss Strange put it on a poster or somebody put it on a poster somewhere, and it said, "I'll poke your eye out for some land," and it kind of stuck, and it's kind of funny. But I mean, it's true. That's what it was. And then 16 is Lincoln. All right, so let's look very quickly at the branches of government. All right, and I just kind of added in this area because it was blank, and why not? Because I needed to review the branches of government anyway. Okay, so the legislative branch is made up of Congress. It is a bicameral legislature. Bicameral means two chambers, okay? So Congress is made up of two chambers in their legislature. They have the Senate, and it has equal representation, okay? So every state has 2 senators. And then you have the House of Representatives, and that is based on population. So your amount of population, you're going to have a proportional number of representatives. The job of Congress is to make the laws. That is what Congress does. Congress makes the laws. Okay? All right, so once the law is made, our next branch, its job is to enforce the law that Congress passed. Okay, so you have the executive branch, that's the president and vice president. They work in the White House. They enforce and follow through with the law. So this is all of the law. Oh, sorry, it wasn't even up there. This is all of the law enforcement. Okay, so the CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, all of those are part of the executive branch that enforces the law. Okay, and I'll kind of keep it on there because I don't need the other space. And then you have the Supreme Court in the judicial branch. That is our third and final branch, and they determine if a law or action is constitutional. Okay, so they have judicial branch, Supreme Court, they determine if a law or action is constitutional. Okay. All right. Okay, so if you have room on your paper, because some of you will have a little bit more than others from what I've seen, I want you to add, before we move on to the political parties down there, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, okay? We're going to talk about political parties down here at the bottom, but you need to know why they formed. They formed over disagreements on the power of the federal government, and we call that their constitutional view, and foreign policy. So did they support Britain or France? Okay, so political parties formed over disagreements on the power of the federal government, so what their constitutional view was, and foreign policy. Did they support Britain or did they support France? Okay, so the first time that I did this, I kind of put that definition right here in the center because I was running out of room. And then for other classes, I moved it. So let's look at, I don't know if I can get it all on there. Nope. All right, so for the Federalist Party, this was our first political party. This was John Adams, Alexander Hamilton. They're the ones that are going to start this party. They wanted a strong central government. They were pro-British in terms of trade. Okay, so remember, England and France are at war again. The French are having their revolution, and they're saying, hey, we need you to help us. And we are going to say, no, we're just going to keep trading with Britain. Yeah, it was kind of controversial. So they're going to be pro-British because of trade, because they are our biggest trading partner. And then they are loose constructionists. What that means is they're going to look at the Constitution more as like the Jack Sparrow's guidelines for pirates instead of a pirate code. It's more like guidelines anyway. That's how the Federalists are going to see it. They're going to use the elastic clause and say, oh no, I mean, the Constitution says that we can do what is necessary and proper. So, well, this is necessary and proper. That is the opposite of the Democratic Republicans. So let's look at them. The Democratic Republicans, they are led by Madison and Thomas Jefferson. So James Madison, father of the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration, okay? They opposed strong federal government, and they wanted states to have more power. They opposed strong federal government and wanted states to have more power. They were pro-France. They're like, look, during the American Revolution, we made a treaty with France that we would support them in their revolution. Now, Washington, when he finally made his decision, said, well, technically, we made a deal, and if you know all the Hamilton lyrics, you know the story. We made a deal with King Louis, but y'all killed King Louis, therefore, our contract, our treaty, is nullified, because you killed him. So technically, we got out of it, but the intent was still there. So they were pro-France, and this is the big difference. They are strict constructionists, meaning if the Constitution doesn't say that you can do it, then the government can't do it. Okay? If the Constitution doesn't say it, the federal government can't do it. It's that simple. Okay? All right. For the economy, so switch over to the economy. Students are still struggling with a couple of different things, and I am probably going to change that.